Hi class, it's time for us to chat again about what's happening in Health Science 391. So you had quite a few assignments due last night. You had the discussion board post, the relevance assignment, which was that survey critique, and also your methods and sampling framework. You will be receiving feedback on all of those assignments within the next week to week and a half, but the feedback on the methods section will come first. And the reason for that is you must resubmit your methods section, assuming that that is what your feedback indicates, before you can submit your IRB application on March 6th. And the reason for that is the IRB is going to go through and carefully review your plan for your study along with your survey. And in order for them to do that, and to prove it, you need to have a very solid method section. So we might need to tweak a few things. If you are asked to resubmit your method section, don't worry. That is somewhat expected in this class. And the reason for that is research is a process that we go through. It's not one and done. We make changes as we receive additional information. We make changes as we improve our skill set. So it's okay. If your group is asked to redo something, don't worry. The other reason we do that is that we want things to be good. So when we get to the end of the semester and you're writing that final paper, you do have to make some edits based on the feedback, but that you've probably already gone through and made a lot of those changes. So that final paper is really good and something that you can put in your portfolio for your future, whatever you decide to do with it for your future. So let's talk about the survey. This week is all about surveys. As you start writing your survey, look for surveys around you. If any of you happen to be in an airport this week, you'll notice there are a lot of surveys in airports. Everything from, do you like the moving sidewalks? I noticed there was something about that in the Atlanta airport, to how clean was this bathroom, and then the smiley face things that you press and your response is recorded. So wherever you are, look for surveys. They come up. They come from your kid's school. They come from Amazon with your customer satisfaction. They come out in public at places where you're asked to rate the cleanliness or the friendliness of the staff. As you start to look for these surveys, you will notice they are everywhere, and it will make writing a survey become an even more important skill than you already knew it was. So, the surveys. If I can offer you one piece of advice for this week, it is that you strongly consider using that spreadsheet that I sent you at the beginning of the semester. And the reason for that is that spreadsheet will help you connect your survey questions to your research questions. And you must do that. When I go through and grade and critique those surveys, and you better believe there will be comments on every survey, I will do it with your research questions on one computer screen and your survey questions on the other. I am going to try and make the connections between your survey questions and your research questions. The reason for that is the only data that you are allowed to use to answer those research questions and fulfill the requirements of this project are the survey questions. So if the survey questions are bad, or if the survey questions are off topic, you cannot answer the research questions and you cannot succeed on the assignment. If you cannot answer the research questions, or you cannot collect the data necessary to answer the research questions, you cannot successfully complete the results section. That's the next section, the results and data analysis, or the discussion section. You need to make sure that these survey questions are good. And that will require that you go through and write and rewrite them. But even more important than that, even more important than the wording of those questions is correct, the topic of those questions needs to be correct. And the way that we do that is we have our research questions here, survey questions here, make connections. If you have a question that is not connecting to a research question, then ask yourself, do I need this question? If the answer is no, then strongly consider removing it. If you find that you have asked, let's say, 18 questions, you have 18 really good research questions, or really good survey questions, but then you have one or two extra things that you don't need it to answer the research questions, but it would add another layer to your project, or it is additional related and interesting information. If you have extra space, keep that in. Just make sure that you have answered all of the research questions first. If you have extra space, feel free to add in those nice to know questions. So ask yourself as you're doing this, is this a need to know question or is this a nice to know question? Do I need this to answer my research question or do I want it because it's interesting? Make sure that you fill all those need to know slots first and then move on to the nice to knows. One piece of advice, I highly recommend that you put the demographic questions at the end of your survey. And the reason for that is you want people to spend as much time as possible on those very important questions. And so you're going to want to put very important questions first in the survey and then kind of filter down to the less important questions. People will usually answer your demographic questions even if they're at the end of the survey just because they're really easy to do. They may skip over hard questions if those appear at the end of the survey. So we want to front load those more difficult, thought-provoking questions. Remember as you're writing these questions that what may seem threatening to you may not seem threatening. What may not seem threatening to you may seem threatening to someone else. So ask a friend, if someone were to ask you this question, would you be embarrassed if they knew your answer? Keep in mind that your survey will be anonymous, but it's just a great way to gauge whether or not a question is going to be deemed threatening. And by threatening, we do sometimes mean embarrassing or uncomfortable. The IRB is very conservative in their judgment of the questions. So you need to be very careful about the questions that you ask. If your project focuses on mental health, you cannot ask an individual about their own mental health. You can ask them in a somewhat roundabout way, like in your opinion, would this affect someone's mental health? But you can't ask, for example, would this affect your mental health? That is too close and considered too threatening to people. Likewise, you can't ask anyone about their own personal medical history. You can ask in a general, do you think this would affect people generally type way, or in your opinion, would this impact something? But you cannot ask directly about their personal experience. It's not that surveys in general can't do that. It's just the type of survey that we are doing. We are going to go through what is called an exempt IRB review, and that means that they will not review your survey and methods as carefully as they would if you were going through a full board review. Why are we doing an exempt IRB review? Well, that takes 3 to 5 business days, and a full board review takes multiple months, which often requires revisions and meetings with the IRB to get that done. We don't have months, and this is to get you familiar. This class is meant to get you familiar with the process, not to produce groundbreaking research. If you want to select a project that goes through a full board review, I highly recommend that you look into that in graduate school. If you are going to graduate school for public health, then you don't have a choice. You will get the privilege of doing that and going through a full board review at some point. But for this class, we're going with exempt reviews, which means not asking anyone about their children, about or their parenting experience. We're not asking anyone about their mental health, their specific mental health in general, great. We are also not asking anyone that is cognitively impaired or is a family member that's cognitively impaired about their own experiences. So keep that in mind as we move forward. The survey is your most important data collection tool. We talked about that. Do not be tempted to make this be a 10-question survey. You cannot successfully complete the remainder of the class by writing a 10-question survey. Your survey needs to include, I would say, 15 to 20 good questions. And then maybe 5 to 6 demographic questions. You don't need to know every single little demographic detail about the people answering your questions, but you need to know enough about them that you can make generalizations later. So you do need to know their gender. You do need to know their age. You probably need to know their location as well. You may need to know their socioeconomic status, maybe even their marital status. Look at the basic demographic questions that you see in a normal survey. One of the ways you can do that is by logging into Qualtrics. They have a bank of questions. You are welcome to use their demographic questions. But it will give you an idea of some of the things that are in there. If you are asking questions about whether or not a child's sleep affects the sleep of their parents, well, you can't ask someone about their personal experience. You need to know if the people answering your questions have children under the age of 18 living in their household. Things like that. Look at which demographic questions logically align with your topic and go from there. Again, I recommend moving those to the end of the survey just because people generally know how old they are, they know their gender, things like that. That's not something they need to think about, and we want to catch them while they're thinking at the beginning and get those real questions answered. If you have any questions about what's happening in the next few weeks, please let me know. Look for that methods and sampling feedback. It should be to you before next Wednesday. Also, be looking for emails in your inbox just in case there are any problems with the Canvas submissions of those assignments. Again, we're still working through some of the Canvas issues. I haven't seen any in our class this week, but some of the other instructors and their sections have seen things. So you may see some of their bleed over into ours. Let me know if you have any questions, and I'm happy to answer them.